Joy Division have an undeniable reputation, thanks to two classic albums with Unknown Pleasures and Closer. However, because of this reputation, bootleggers try and take the piss. Have a look at this video I found where a man's showing off his Joy Division bootleg collection. He has 165 bootlegs of Joy Division. This is because there is so much bullshit and misinformation peddled for the sake of making a profit capitalizing on Joy Division's name. Today, I'm going to set the record straight and give you the definitive guide to Joy Division bootleg recordings. Because in the history of popular music, there is an established canon, great records and known legends. That's fine, but we can do better. Let me take you to a world of boots and also legs. I'll be telling the stories of the fake and the leaked, exploring stolen tapes and lost recordings. It's a moral dark zone, but in it are some of music's most fascinating stories. And today I want to look at the gods of post-punk. Part 1! The Warsaw Bootleg! That's what the first bootleg we're going to be looking at today is, the Warsaw Bootleg. Now this is one of the most famous bootlegs probably going. It's always in production. If you go on eBay right now, you could find 20 different copies, and there's a variety of artworks. You can get the ugly as fuck metal one, the baby one, which is a bit better, or the copy that I've got, where they don't even try to have their own artmark, they just use Unknown Pleasures again. And to be fair, it is a classic t-shirt. As I think there's 3 films and 20 books that already cover the Joy Division story, I don't really feel the need to get into it. You know that they formed in Manchester, Manchester was depressing, they played some gigs, Ian Curtis died, bada bing, bada boom. Right, you know this, you're a cool guy, you're watching Howard Hand's television, you know what's good. But we do need a little bit of context. So, let's meet our characters.
Who's your character?
Bernard Sumner. Not Summer, Sumner. Like some nerd. He was the lead guitarist, wrote the tasty hook on Disorder, formed the band with Peter Hook, aka Hooky, bassist, played in a distinctly melodic style. He found a lead singer in Ian Curtis. Middle name Kevin. Then there was the drummer, Stephen Morris. He was hired because the last drummer they had was a dickhead and they left him on the road. And then Stephen Morris was not a dickhead, so he was in the band. That's the true story. Let's talk about Unknown Pleasures for a minute, because it's not just the central document in Joy Division's discography. I think it's also the central document of post-punk as a genre. Look, there it is in the literal centre of post-punk. Wow! While Joy Division were not the first post-punk band, that probably goes to Susie and the Banshees or Wire, they could arguably be the first post-punk band to drop punk's aggression and instead replace it with introspection and existentialism.
I wanna be a Phil David and Sunday son again, fucking my life, embarrass my wife, and live a bad taste.
Ian Curtis sings about what he is and is not feeling, harrowing descriptions of what is and isn't there. These are powerful lyrics on their own, but he'll couple these observations with the physical sensation of touch breaking through his dour internalizations. Take the second verse of She's Lost Control, for example.
And how I'll never know just why you're
It's heavy stuff. Powerful. Powerful and heavy. It makes me think. An important figure to mention during this time is Martin Hannet. Martin Hannet did the production on Unknown Pleasures. He previously worked with the Buzzcocks on their debut EP. But most importantly is he was really very funny. Here are a couple of quotes of Joy Division members talking about their experience with Martin Hannet. Bernard Sumner later recalled, "Martin didn't give a fuck about making a pop record. All he wanted to do was experiment. His attitude was that you get a load of drugs, lock the door of the studio, and you stay in there all night and you see what you've got the next morning. And you keep doing that until it's done. That's how all our records were made. We were on speed, Martin was into smack." That's also how my videos are made. Peter Hook recalled meeting the irascible Hannet in a December 1997 issue of NME. "Bernard and I were very down to earth, and he was like from another planet. He was just this really weird hippie who never talked any sense at all. At least I never knew what he was talking about anyway. Still, you had a rapport with him. He used to say to Rob, 'Get these two thick, stupid cunts out of my way.' In the studio, we'd sit on the left and he'd sit on the right, and if we said anything like, 'I think the guitars are a bit quiet, Martin,' he'd scream, 'Oh my god, why don't you fuck off, you stupid retards?' It was alright at first, but gradually he started to get weirder and weirder." Stephen Morris recalled, "We had this one battle where it was nearly midnight and I said, 'Is it alright if I go home, Martin? It's been a long day.' And he whispers, 'Okay, you go home.' So I went back to the flat, just got to sleep and the phone rings. 'Martin wants you to come back to do the snare drum.' At 4 a.m, I said, 'What's wrong with the snare drum?' So every time I hear Love Will Tear Us Apart, I grit my teeth and remember myself shouting down the phone, 'You bastard!' I can feel the anger in it even now." I could read a whole book of Martin Hannet anecdotes. I love them so much. They say that in the Beatles, George R. Martin was the 5th Beatle, and I think in Joy Division that Martin Hannet was the 5th Joy Division. Take a listen to the closing track, I Remember Nothing, paying close attention to the sparse production and the atmosphere. That's pretty spooky, right? So let's compare it with pre-Martin Hannet Joy Division on their self-produced and self-released debut EP, An Ideal for Living.
3, 5, 0, 1, 2, 5, go! I was there in the backstage when this light came around.
As the EP continues, you can hear Ian Curtis's signature dark lyrics, especially on the track Leaders of Men. However, it's still coming from a place of anger, which would get filtered out in Unknown Pleasures.
Made a victim out of your life when your time's on the door and it dripped to the floor.
And my stomach is sick, and she's touching his chest now. Da, da, da. So you've got an ear for Joy Division as a punk band, and you want to listen to some more. We get to this little puppy. The Warsaw Bootleg! Now, as I said, this is one of the most common bootlegs of all time. You'll definitely be able to get a copy if you're interested. But when you're looking it up, you'll find out that the track listings change. And this might scare you, might worry you, but not to be afraid. I'll explain everything. In order to illustrate the differences, I actually got 2 copies. Now, the front covers, they don't matter. These will change. What you need to look at is the track listings. So, the default selection that you're going to see looks like this. It has all of this for you through to Shadow Play. Now, you might see, instead of all of this for you might see a track at the start called The Drawback. It's the same track, alright? It's exactly the same. They just changed the names. This is just bootleggers messing with you. It's the same song, they just changed the names. Okay. The other difference you'll see is that this one is ending at shadow play, and this one has As You Said, and then 5 other tracks afterwards. I'll get into a little bit more about that, but let's talk about the default selection first.
The timeline for events here is a little bit hazy, but at some point RCA approached Joy Division to produce a full-length album, and Joy Division, knowing that Lou Reed, Iggy Pop and David Bowie were on that label, enthusiastically said yes. The problem is that at this time RCA were really looking for a new wave act to sell in America, and Joy Division were still in their extremely punk phase. So when the producers tried to introduce synthesizers into the sessions, they basically just had a fit and completely revolted against that. But the sessions fell apart and the album never came out. But the sessions got released as the bootleg Warsaw. What's so fascinating to me about the Warsaw bootleg is it sounds like An Ideal for Living turned into a full album, which Unknown Pleasures just does not. It's clearly unfinished in a lot of ways that I'll get into, but just breathing in these versions of the tracks reveals so much about the band, and I find it so genuinely fascinating to look at. Critics like to describe the band The Stooges as proto-punk because of their huge influence on the punk genre.
See the players of the mud man, all the players of the mud man.
Maybe you missed the Stooges' influence there. It was quite subtle. The story goes that the producer that RCA hired actively disliked Joy Division, so a lot of the tracks that are left are quite barren, and the ones that do have the synthesizer applied to, it sounds like shit. There's a version of Transmission on here that it'll make you roll your eyes when you hear it.
Radio, live transmission. Radio, live transmission.
And when I say that the tracks without synthesizer were produced dryly, we can compare the tracks that appear on Unknown Pleasures with the RCA Sessions version and hear the difference. The funny thing about it is that everyone knows this as the Warsaw bootleg,
But the band weren't Warsaw at this point. They'd already become Joy Division. It's the Joy Division RCA sessions, but it's been mislabeled and missold for so long that everyone just calls it the Warsaw bootleg. So, can we hear Warsaw at all, or is it just Joy Division all the way to the top? That's where the 5 tracks come in.
Part 1.5, the Warsaw bootleg. For real this time.
The 5 tracks at the end there, Inside the Line through You're No Good For Me, that's the Warsaw demo. So that's recorded in 1977, which, as you know, that's the year where fucking punk happened, right? You punk historians will know 1977, that's the year, man. That's when the Sex Pistols had their debut album, The Clash had their debut album. 1977 is the punk year. And they were there with their Warsaw demo at that time. So what does Warsaw sound like when it's actually Warsaw and not Joy Division in a costume? Well, it's punk. For real this time. They go... Hey! And... And it sounds scuzzy. It reminds me of The Damned quite a bit.
Rap nothing's on me, whatever you do. We're not normal, but we're different from you. You're such a shit time, you're really cool still. Don't wanna talk to you, just let me your mom.
The Warsaw 5-track comes from cassette quality, and also it's like just when they started out. So the musicianship and the audio quality are both bad, but that's not really why anyone's listening to it.
It's a really interesting relic of the punk phase of one of the bands that would define post-punk.
If you can get a copy that has the RCA sessions and the Warsaw 5 tracks, then I do recommend it, especially because it probably won't cost you very much. Just keep in mind, like, not to worry about any of this shit on the front cover, like An Ideal for Living the demos. That doesn't even make sense. The RCA sessions happened after An Ideal for Living, and the 5 tracks were recorded just so that they could get some gigs early on. Like, they'll just put any old bollocks on the front to try and sell you a copy.
But what about As You Said? What about As You Said, which is also included on here? Well, fucking bootleggers, man. That's a B-side from 1980. It's got nothing to do with Warsaw whatsoever, and I don't know why they throw it on.
If you want to go even further back than Warsaw, they were actually going by the name The Stiff Kittens for a small period of time.
I ordered a copy of the Stiff Kittens on eBay, and all I got was this fake Limber Kitty. Damn bootleggers ripping me off again.
Was that Purr produced by Martin Hannet?
And that's as far back as the time machine goes, unfortunately. 1977 was the year that they were inspired to start the band after seeing Sex Pistols live in Manchester at the famous Manchester Sex Pistols gig. Look that up in your own time. I'm not going to get into it, but it's important to music history, probably. I hear. So let's go back forwards again to when they were working with Martin Hannet and take a closer look at what Martin Hannet was able to do for the band.
Part 2, the Hannet Tapes.
So I get a lot of my bootlegs off of eBay. And while I was looking for Joy Division bootlegs, I found these 2 specific bootlegs in the studio with Martin Hannet and Martin Hannet's personal mixes. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what the fuck are these? I don't know these. And what was really weird is on the front cover, it had a specific, like, proud record label, Ozit Morpheus. And there was a website and everything. And this is really weird because normally bootleggers, they like to keep that shit on the down low, right? And then the rabbit hole opens up quick. I love that the Discogs profile is just uncertain. They have a question right there, the second sentence of the profile, like they don't even know if what they're saying is true. There's 2 websites attached. Of course, I clicked spaceritual.net first because hell fucking yes, I'm clicking spaceritual.net first. I see it's going to be one of those websites, huh? I see they used Adobe Dreamweaver for this one. After clicking through a number of rotating GIFs, I managed to find a link to their shop on the website. You kids think you're cool with your Instagram marketplaces and your Shopify stores, your Etsy's? Nah, this is how you do it. You just have a fucking HTML table with a list of your products and you tell them to just fucking email you for prices. This is how you make a web store online. This is how you run a business. And I was just cracking jokes before, but they have a DVD on this store called He Wasn't Just the Fifth Member of Joy Division, a film about Martin Hannet, record producer, musician, scientific experimenter with sound. It looks like shit. A rough cut reportage style documentary, huh? Based upon an original idea by Anthony Ryan Carter. How can it be a documentary about a person and be based upon an original idea? Isn't it based upon a man? Here's an original idea for you. Hire a graphic designer. That soft outline on Martin Hannet looks like shit. And so does your whole website, as a matter of fact. Okay, so here's the store page for Joy Division, Martin Hannet's personal mixes, distributed by Ozit Morpheus Records. Discovered by friends of Martin Hannet recently, and with input from one of his relatives, these recordings give a rare insight into his production ideas for Joy Division and his relationship with the band, the strange things / sound effects they recorded in the studio together, etc. Okay, so that's how they got the rights to this. It's, from his relatives and friends. Okay, I see. On this album, we have rare alternative mixes of Joy Division that were Martin's personal favourites. A must for Joy Division fans. Shit, I've got to order this on PayPal immediately. Let's take a look at the other bootleg as well while we're here. Holy shit, guys, this is one of the most important Joy Division discoveries ever, according to the store listing. It's kind of a red flag that this is a double CD without a track listing on the page. Instead, we get the hint. Tracks included, many with multiple versions, are Digital, Glass, Atmosphere, Dead Souls, Ice Age, N4, and Eternal. But it is one of the most important Joy Division discoveries ever, so I guess we're going to have to listen to it. I see why the track listing was hidden now. You might not want the customer to know that the tracks are named things like Metronome Initial Adjustments Number 1 and Metronome Initial Adjustments Number 2, Industrial Buildup, etc. And who can forget Dead Souls plus Metronome Intro Adjustment Full Track, etc. Yes, it might not do to know that most of the tracks are ambient warm-ups and setting up studio equipment. They're either really short, shit like less than a minute of fucking about, or they're in the 15 minutes, like 10 minute plus range, and they just sound like this. On the one hand, cool. On the other hand, this is definitely just farting about with studio equipment. I'll play you some more. Of all the studio bullshit, there is some cool stuff if you're into early electronic experimental stuff. I quite like the track that is called Noise Drums Sign Warm Up. So if those tracks represent the electronic experimentation and the ambience that Martin was trying to build, what about those alternate mixes of tracks off of Closer? Apparently these are Martin Hannet's preferred mixes of the songs. How do they sound? Well, you have two things going on. Digital delay and reverb. And just turn it up. Just turn up the digital delay and reverb. Drown it. The vocals, fuck them.
bitterness, love shattered pride. What once was innocent turned on its side.
The way that I've structured this video, I talked about the RCA sessions first, and they're produced super dry. And now we have these Martin Hannet tapes, and frankly, like if you try and listen to them as an album, it's unlistenable shit. But that's not really why they're interesting. Instead, it's basically like the Martin Hannet production is the spice to the Joy Division stew, right? And the RCA tapes are Joy Division with no spice, and the Hannet tapes are a whole bottle of spice. If you try and eat that, that's going to be disgusting. But you rub it on your Joy Division meat and, ooh, flavorful. Suddenly you've got a flavorful composition. This metaphor's getting weird, but you know what I'm talking about. The Martin Hannet tapes answer the question, what would Joy Division be like if we took away Joy Division and just had Martin Hannet's production? When talking about a band's sound and the production, it can be a bit nebulous sometimes. People have a hard time talking about atmosphere and having something concrete to point to because of that. The Hannet tapes are good because you can listen to it and it's all atmosphere. And you go, oh, I get it. I see what Martin Hannet was adding here. And that's not something you get often with music. And especially because Joy Division's 2 albums are so landmark, it's a really cool thing to see. Ozzy Morpheus are marketing this completely wrong in my opinion. Saying it's this like, holy fuck, most important revelation for Joy Division fans ever? Nah, like, it's not an album. You listen to it as an album, you're gonna fucking hate it. But if you listen to it as like the doodlings of Martin Hannet, then you can get behind it. I do know a couple of music fans who I think would be really into this, but for the majority of Joy Division listeners, I don't recommend that you pick up a physical copy. With that said, I think it's time for us to move on to
Part 3. Why are there so many weird fucking bootlegs?
As I said, the key to this mystery lies in identifying sessions, and here joydiv.org is clutch.
The Warsaw demo, we've talked about that one. An Ideal for Living, Done It, RCA Sessions, The Drawback through to Shadowplay. You know about that one.
A factory sample. This one was produced by Martin Hannet and also featured Cabaret Voltaire, John Peel Session 1. This one got an official release, but it's a bit spenny. Genetic demos. These are only interesting because of how bored Ian Curtis sounds while doing them. This is mostly available on the Heart and Soul bootleg. The only track that isn't available is Digital, which is far and away the worst one, which I just played for you. And this starts a trend of mostly being available on the Heart and Soul box set. For example, the Piccadilly Radio Session, again, all but one track available on the Heart and Soul box set. The failed first attempt at recording Transmission. 2 tracks are on Heart and Soul, and 2 tracks you have to bootleg. And most shockingly is there's only 3 tracks from the RCA sessions. Why must you hurt me in this way, Heart and Soul box set? Why must you be so cruel? Literally every other session recording that Joy Division did is available officially in some capacity. So let's look at the bootlegs now. Luckily, the absolute champions at joydiv.org also track that. I'm just going to scroll through them now and just fucking look at them. Look at how many bootlegs there are. That guy in the video at the start, he had like 6 copies of Pearl Harbor. And so I'm looking at the page, like trying to work out like what's the deal with Pearl Harbor. It's just the Warsaw demo and the RCA sessions again. Why? And they're all like this. Interzone LP? Oh, that sounds cool. Oh, it's just the RCA sessions again. And if it's not the RCA sessions, it's a mélange of live cuts that they've just thrown together. A nonsensical mashing of tracks into places they don't belong. Like the As You Said B-side being put on the Warsaw bootleg, for example. And I do want to point out this one, which has 2 tracks by Orange Juice, which is just a different band entirely. I really like that this one's called Where Will It End? Where will it end? Where will it end? When are you going to stop? Where will it end? If you're interested in checking out the live albums, I can recommend the Paradiso Club in Amsterdam and the Les Bains Douches in Paris. Those are generally agreed to be the best live bootlegs. We understand what those Joy Division bootlegs are, but it leaves the question of why. What is it about Joy Division in particular that leads there to be 165 Joy Division bootlegs? Why are there so many Joy Division bootlegs compared to other bands? Slowdive have a comparable amount of unofficial, unreleased material, but nowhere near the insane numbers when it comes to bootleg vinyl pressings, even accounting for the differing levels of popularity. The most obvious reason is the limited amount of official material. The band only has 2 studio albums and then a handful of singles, so people will want to hear more of their favourite band. But I think it's a little bit deeper than that, so I'm going to put forward a couple of other theories I have. Reason number 2 is that the distribution rights were a mess historically. An Ideal for Living was self-released, and Factory Records had their whole "the band owns everything" policy. A lot of the bootlegs that come out come from Europe, and some of the companies that are producing them still swear up and down to this day that they have the legitimate distribution rights for their territory. This is why you can find some of them on Spotify, even though they're not linked from the artist page. Point number 3. There's a legal loophole with bootlegs, which makes it much easier to distribute and sell them if you don't use the artist's name explicitly. It's highly likely, in my opinion, that the Warsaw bootleg is called the Warsaw bootleg despite not recording a band called Warsaw, because if they call it Warsaw, they don't have to call it Joy Division. Point number 4. Joy Division fans were primed for it, with a messy discography, one of the worst posthumous albums of all time, and bad management from their record label, Factory. The band hit a peak in their popularity after Ian Curtis died. They got a genuine top 20 hit with Love Will Tear Us Apart 1 month after it happened. Not to mention that track also topped the indie chart, which actually mattered at that time, and also apparently placed in the top 50 in the disco chart. It's a very similar situation to Lil Peep, where they were just on the cusp of breaking through to the mainstream, and then the death actually draws more attention to the artist. And so the posthumous releases sell very well. Or that would be the case if they had material to posthumously release. Ian Curtis dies in May 1980. Love Will Tear Us Apart is released in June 1980 and continues to sell well for the rest of the year. 1981 comes, and Factory want to sell a record based on the success of Love Will Tear Us Apart, but Joy Division don't exist. They don't really have any more recordings. So they put together Still, which is a compilation which is just fucking shambles. Look at this. It's just thrown together scraps from all the different sessions, songs that weren't good enough to make the albums that they were recorded for, a live track, a totally different live performance thrown up on a second LP. It's a fucking mess. How is this any better than the stuff that you're getting on bootlegs like fucking An Ideal for Killing? Still is so bad that it primed fans to accept, well, we'll just take some tracks from this session, some live cuts, put it on a record, give it a fancy name and a fancy box, and you'll buy it, because fuck you. Disclaimer. When I say that Still is shit, I'm not talking about the recordings. I like the songs that are on it. I just think that as a product, as a double LP, that it's assembled in a predatory way. Please don't leave me angry comments again. I like it. I just think it's bad. And my final point is that the older stuff, tracks like Digital, which appeared on the Factory sample, the An Ideal for Living EP, and the Licht und Blindheit EP were extremely difficult to get until 1988 when Factory put out Substance, which was an actually decent compilation. They also re-released Licht und Blindheit and called it Atmosphere. But the point is that until 1988, the fan demand was not being met. Look at all of these unofficial re-releases of An Ideal for Living during the 80s. Let me put into perspective how late 1988 is, okay? Blue Monday was released in 1983. That's Blue Monday, the best-selling 12-inch single of all time. At this point, New Order have 4 albums and a compilation album themselves. And if you're a fan after hearing Blue Monday, you just can't listen to these killer older tracks. So if someone comes along in 1986 and says, hey, here's this unofficial record called Pearl Harbor, which has a bunch of tracks that I know that you've not heard before, it's probably a tempting offer. I even found this promotional article from the New York Times about the release of Still, which describes it competing with the various Joy Division bootlegs at that time.
This video has really been about getting to the bottom of what's going on with Joy Division bootlegs, and I think it's some combination of these 5 factors.
It doesn't actually explain why that guy has so many copies of Pearl Harbor, but I knew a guy once who had like 5 copies of Sonic Heroes, so I think some people are just like that. After this, Joy Division become New Order. New Order have their own demos, some of which are pretty cool. I like the Western Works demo, but I feel like I've neatly wrapped up the original question, which was, what the hell is going on with those Joy Division bootleg records? Hopefully you guys have found out some facts you didn't know, hopefully I've cleared up some misinformation that maybe you held, and if not, I hope you enjoyed the video anyway. Please do subscribe just for the fact that I like it, and have a good day.